Here is something that should not make sense. A rusted, seized, incomplete wreck of an old military vehicle, a pile of corroded steel that has not moved in 50 years, can be worth more than the same vehicle fully restored and gleaming. Read that again because it inverts everything you would assume. Normally, you take a wreck, you pour money and work into it, and you sell it for more than you spent. That is the whole idea of restoration. But in this strange corner of the market, the raw, untouched, honest wreck can command a price that a beautifully finished one cannot. And the reason why opens the door to one of the most misunderstood businesses there is. Because a military vehicle restoration shop is not really selling restored vehicles, it is selling a combination of two things almost nobody prices correctly: provenance, the proven history of a specific machine, and labor, thousands of hours of rare, skilled, patient work. That metal, the thing everyone thinks they are buying, is often the least valuable part of the whole equation. Here is the fact that runs through everything. In this business, you do not make your money on the vehicle. You make it, or lose it, on two invisible things: what you can prove about where it has been, and how many hours it takes to bring it back. Get those two wrong, and the shiniest Jeep in the world will lose you money. Get them right, and a heap of rust becomes a small fortune. This is the full ledger of a business built on rust, history, and time. Why the wreck can beat the restoration, why the parts hunt is the real work, why labor is the entire cost, why matching numbers matter more than paint, why provenance multiplies value, and why you are really selling hours and history, not steel. Let me open the ledger. Why the wreck can beat the restoration. Start with that opening paradox, because understanding it explains the whole field. Why would an untouched wreck sometimes be worth more than a finished restoration? Because of a word that governs this entire market: originality. To a serious collector, an original, unrestored vehicle, however rough, is a document. Every original part, every factory marking, every untouched surface is evidence, proof of what the vehicle actually is and where it came from. It can never be faked because it is still there, as it left the factory and as it served. A wreck in original condition is a primary historical source on wheels, and the moment you restore it, you begin, unavoidably, to erase that evidence. Old parts are replaced with new ones. Original paint is stripped and repainted. Factory markings vanish under fresh coats. A restoration might be beautiful, but every step of it removes a little of the original, irreplaceable material and replaces it with something modern, however faithful. A restored vehicle is, in a sense, partly a reproduction of itself. So for the rarest and most historically important vehicles, the market can prize the honest wreck over the perfect restoration, because the wreck is real and complete as a record, and the restoration, however skilled, is partly a recreation. This is why a knowledgeable owner of a rare original will sometimes deliberately not restore it, preserving it exactly as found, because they understand that the originality is the value, and restoring it would destroy the very thing that made it precious. That single idea, that originality is a finite resource you spend when you restore, sits underneath every decision in this business. It is a strange kind of asset, one that gets a little less valuable, in one specific sense, every time you improve it. A painting does not lose authenticity when you clean it badly and repaint it, it just becomes a ruined painting. A vehicle is subtler. A beautiful restoration does improve it in most ways, and yet quietly diminishes the one thing, originality, that the highest end of the market prizes most. Holding those two truths at once, that restoration both adds and subtracts value, is the beginning of understanding the whole trade. The two roads. So, a restoration shop faces a fundamental choice on every vehicle, and it defines the whole trade. One road is preservation. Take an original vehicle and conserve it. Stabilize the decay, keep it running, but leave its originality intact. Touch as little as possible. This protects the historical value, and for a rare enough vehicle, it is the right and most valuable path. A second road is full restoration. Take a vehicle, often one too far gone to preserve, and bring it all the way back. Rebuilt, repainted, returned to how it looked when new. This is where most of the work and most of the visible glory lives. And for the vast majority of vehicles, the ones that are not rare enough to preserve as relics, it is exactly what the market wants. A skill of the business is knowing which road each vehicle belongs on. Restore a rare original that should have been preserved, and you have destroyed value with your own hands, turning a precious document into a nice-looking recreation worth less than what you started with. Preserve a common wreck that should have been restored, and you are sitting on a rusty pile nobody wants. And the judgment of which vehicle deserves which treatment is worth more than any wrench in the shop. That judgment rests entirely on the thing that determines everything else in this business: history. What can actually be proven about this specific machine? Provenance. Again, if you watch the auction house, this will sound familiar because it is the same force at work, and it is just as powerful here. Provenance. A documented history of a specific vehicle. In military vehicles, provenance can multiply value as violently as it does with metals and helmets. Consider two identical restored Jeeps. Same model, same year, same quality of restoration, standing side by side. One is a Jeep, a nice, correct, well-restored example of a common type. That other can be proven, through documentation, to have served in a specific famous campaign, or to have been the actual vehicle in a known photograph, or to carry a verifiable history connecting it to real events. That second Jeep is not worth a little more. It can be worth several times more, because the buyer is no longer buying a Jeep. They are buying a specific piece of history that happens to be a Jeep. This is why the paperwork, the archives, the unit records, the chassis and engine numbers traced through official documents can be worth more than the entire mechanical restoration. A restorer who can establish and prove a vehicle's history adds a layer of value that no amount of polishing can match. A wrench brings the vehicle back to life. An archive tells you whose life it was. It stacks, exactly as it did in the auction house. A running vehicle is worth something. A correctly restored one, worth more. One with its original documentation, more again. One whose history can be traced to a named event or a named person, worth a sum that has almost nothing to do with the metal and everything to do with the story. In this business, the historian and the mechanic are equally important, and the shops that understand that are the ones that thrive. Listen to that again. The documents proving where a vehicle has been can be worth more than the entire mechanical rebuild. Say that again? You can spend thousands of hours and a fortune in parts making a vehicle mechanically perfect, and a single folder of proven history, unit records, period photographs, a traceable chain of ownership can add more value than all of that work combined. Its engine is the same, its restoration is the same. A difference is a paper trail, and that paper trail can outvalue the entire physical rebuild. That is the deepest lesson of the field. You are not restoring metal, you are restoring and proving a story. And the story is where the real money lives. The parts hunt is the real work, now the part of the business that consumes the most time and breaks the most hearts. Finding the parts. When a vehicle is decades old and was built in wartime and has not been in production for generations, the parts to restore it correctly do not sit on a shelf. They have to be hunted. That hunt is a huge, often invisible, part of the entire cost and difficulty of the business. There are a few sources, and each is its own struggle. There are the survivors, other wrecks and derelicts that can be stripped for the parts you need. The boneyard logic again, where one dead vehicle keeps another alive. There are the hoarders and specialists, people who have spent decades accumulating rare original parts and know exactly what they are worth. There is reproduction, parts remade to original specification, which solves availability but raises the eternal question of originality. Because a vehicle full of brand new reproduction parts is, again, partly a reproduction. And there is the slow, patient trawl through swap meets, auctions, online forums, and word-of-mouth networks, chasing a single correct component for months or years. Here is what people never appreciate. A single, small, correct, original part can take longer to find than the entire mechanical rebuild takes to perform. A restorer can have a vehicle 90% finished and then wait 2 years for one correct, original piece, because the vehicle is not properly right and not properly valuable without it. This hunt is not a side task. For a serious restoration, it is often the longest and most maddening part of the whole project, and the ability to find the unfindable is one of the rarest and most valuable skills a shop can have. Matching numbers and correctness. Now, a concept that decides value at the highest level. and that separates the amateurs from the professionals: matching numbers and correctness. In serious vehicle collecting, it matters enormously whether the major components, the engine, the chassis, the key parts, are the ones that vehicle was actually built or issued with, verified by their numbers matching the records. A vehicle with its original, matching engine is worth substantially more than the same vehicle with a correct but replacement engine of the same type. Metal is identical in function. Value is not, because one is the original machine and the other is a machine with a transplant. Beyond matching numbers is correctness, an obsessive accuracy of the restoration to exactly how the vehicle was originally built. Right bolts, right finish, the right markings, the right components for that exact production batch and date. A serious collector and a serious judge at a serious show can spot an incorrect bolt, a wrong shade of paint, a part from the wrong year. Every one of those errors reduces the value, because the whole premium rests on authenticity, and authenticity is in the details. This is why a correct restoration costs so much more than a good-looking one. Anyone can make an old vehicle look nice. Making it correct, right down to details almost nobody would notice, requires deep knowledge, relentless research, and the patience to source exactly the right part rather than the one that fits. That correctness is invisible to a casual eye and worth a fortune to a serious one, and the shops that can achieve it command prices the merely competent cannot. This is the quiet cruelty of the field. Two vehicles can look identical in a photograph, one correct to the last bolt and one merely tidy, and only an expert eye can tell them apart, yet the price gap between them can be enormous. The value lives in details that almost nobody would ever notice, which is exactly why the serious collector who does notice will pay so much for getting them right and punish so hard for getting them wrong. The ledger: why labor is everything. Now the cost side, and it comes down almost entirely to one thing: time. A full, correct restoration of a military vehicle is measured not in days or weeks, but in thousands of hours of skilled labor. Stripping the vehicle completely, assessing and repairing or replacing every component, fabricating parts that cannot be found, rebuilding the engine, the transmission, the electrics, preparing and finishing every surface correctly, sourcing, fitting, and adjusting each correct part, assembling, testing, and refining the whole machine. Every stage is slow, skilled, hands-on work, and there is an enormous amount of it. Skilled restoration labor is rare and expensive, and rightly so. A person doing it needs to be a mechanic, a fabricator, an electrician, a historian, and a detective, often all at once, with knowledge of a specific vehicle that took decades to acquire. That combination does not come cheap, and it cannot be rushed. A restoration hurried is a restoration done wrong, and done wrong, it destroys the value it was meant to create. So the dominant cost of the business, by far, is hours. Skilled hours, at a real rate, in enormous quantity. When you understand that a serious restoration can absorb thousands of hours, you understand why it can cost more than the finished vehicle will sell for, and why pricing the work, knowing when a restoration makes financial sense and when it never will, is the difference between a shop that survives and one that lovingly restores itself into bankruptcy. The trap. The trap in this business is one of the most seductive and most common in the entire series, because it is powered by passion rather than greed. The restoration that costs more than the vehicle will ever be worth. Here is how it catches people. And it catches almost everyone at least once. You take on a vehicle, you love it, you want it perfect. And perfect has no natural stopping point. Every hour you put in makes it better. So you put in another. You chase the correct part for 2 years. You redo the work that was not quite right. You pour hours and money into the machine because you care, and because stopping short of perfect feels like failure. At the end, you have a magnificent, correct, beautifully restored vehicle that cost far, far more to create than anyone will ever pay for it. A market has a ceiling, set by the vehicle's rarity and history, and it does not care how many hours you lovingly poured in. You can easily spend the price of 2 finished vehicles restoring one, and the market will pay you for one. That passion that makes the work beautiful is the same passion that destroys the economics, because it does not know when to stop. This is why the business kills so many enthusiasts who turn professional. They are brilliant at restoration and hopeless at the ruthless arithmetic of when not to. A discipline to look at a vehicle and say, this one is not worth restoring, or this one gets a good restoration but not a perfect one, because the market will not return the cost of perfect, is the discipline that separates a business from an expensive hobby. It is the hardest discipline in the field, because it means letting the head overrule the hands and the heart. A second trap is destroying value through restoration itself. Restore a vehicle that should have been preserved, or restore it incorrectly, or over-restore it beyond how it originally was, and you can spend a fortune making something worth less than the wreck you started with. A wrench, in the wrong judgment, is a tool for destroying value as easily as creating it. How the survivors do it. So, how does a restoration shop actually survive and thrive? First, it prices the labor honestly and makes the customer face the true hours. It does not absorb thousands of unbilled hours out of love. It charges for the time the work takes, and it walks the customer through the real cost before starting, so that the economics are the customer's problem to accept, not the shop's to swallow. Second, it masters the judgment of preserve versus restore, and correct versus good. It knows which vehicle is a rare document to be conserved, which is a candidate for a full, correct restoration, and which should get a solid, honest rebuild rather than a ruinously expensive, perfect one. That judgment, matched to the vehicle's real market value, is the core skill. Third, it treats provenance research as a core service, not an afterthought. It builds the archives, the contacts, the ability to trace a vehicle's history, because that history is where the value multiplies. And a shop that can prove a story is worth far more than one that can only turn a wrench. Fourth, it builds the parts network relentlessly. The contacts, the sources, the hoard of accumulated rare parts, the reputation that makes people offer it the unfindable component first. In a business where the parts hunt is the bottleneck, the shop with the best network wins. Fifth, it is ruthless about which projects to take. It turns away the labor of love restorations that can never pay, or prices them so the customer funds the passion, and it focuses its own capital on vehicles where the history, the rarity, and the market actually justify the hours. Sixth, it understands what it really sells, not restored metal, time, skill, and proven history, combined into an object that a collector values for reasons that have almost nothing to do with the steel. The verdict. So, could you own a military vehicle restoration shop? Yes, absolutely. Unlike the strategic assets in this series, this is a real, ownable, and deeply rewarding business, but it is one of the most treacherous small businesses there is, because it is powered by passion, and passion is terrible at arithmetic. The barrier to entry is not capital. It is a rare combination of hand skill, historical knowledge, and, hardest of all, the financial discipline to not do what your heart is screaming at you to do. Here is the good year. The shop takes on the right vehicles, ones whose rarity and history justify the work. It prices the labor honestly, so the thousands of hours are paid for. It finds the unfindable parts through its network, proves the provenance through its research, and delivers correct, documented restorations that the market rewards richly because the history and the correctness are real. Reputation grows, the best vehicles and the best customers come to it, and it makes a genuine profit on work it is proud of. And here is the bad year. It falls in love with the wrong projects. It absorbs the unbillable hours because it cannot bear to do less than perfect. It restores a vehicle that should have been preserved, or pours the price of 3 vehicles into one that the market values as 1. Its workmanship is magnificent and the accounts are a disaster, and the shop discovers the oldest truth in the trade, that you can do everything beautifully and still go broke, because the market pays for history and rarity, not for the hours of love you could not stop pouring in. Same vehicles. What separates them is whether the shop had the discipline to price the time, prove the history, and walk away from the projects that could only ever be a beautiful way to lose money. Most of the assets in this series are judged by what they can do or hold. This one is judged by something stranger, the ability to see, in a pile of rust, both the history that is already there and the thousands of hours it would take to reveal it, and to know whether the two together add up to more than they cost. Because that rusted wreck is not really a vehicle at all, not yet. It is a question. How much history can be proven, and how many hours will the answer take? Get both right, and the wreck becomes a documented piece of the past that a collector will treasure and pay a fortune for. Get either wrong, and it becomes a beautiful, perfect, correct machine that quietly bankrupted the person who loved it. You are not selling restored vehicles. You are selling proven history and skilled time welded onto old steel. And the whole art of the business is knowing, before you pick up a single wrench, whether the story is worth telling and the hours are worth spending, because the metal was never the point. Metal was only ever what the history was written on.